parents are, maybe your aunts, your uncles, your relatives are small-scale farmers, or your profession forces you to work with small-scale farmers. So you know the magnitude of the challenge. There are so many issues we would like to put into context through this discussion in order to guide our leaders in the SADC. We are talking about industrialization, to industrialize the region. How do we industrialize the region whose population, 2/3 are living in the rural area? And when we talk of poor people, 80% of the poor people are small-scale farmers. So we are talking about a very sensitive group here. We would like to know, for example, who are they? We should not take it for granted that we know them. We should not think that we know who a small farmer is. Maybe through the discussion today, we'll be able to know who is a small-scale farmer and what are the challenges facing small-scale farmers. And then in the discussion, I would love to hear what kind of pro-poor policies can be put in place to transform small-scale farmers. We should not forget about the previous efforts that have been tried to transform farmers without success. We remember the Maputo Declaration, where heads of states decided to set aside 10% of their budgets to transform small-scale farmers. We have the CADIP. Has it really worked to transform the farmers? Should we continue pushing for it? Or what else can we do differently to make sure that we bring them on board? It will not be able we will not be able to develop the region if we don't have mechanism to bring these on board. Fortunately, we have 6 important people to take us through all these issues related to small-scale farmers. And I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our speakers today. We will have 3 main speakers. The first one will be Honorable Dr. Abdallah Makame, who is the Member of Parliament, East African Legislative Assembly. He will be followed by our guest from South Africa, Mr. Johansen Eksten, from the Business Development and Marketing Manager, who is a Business Development Marketing Manager. And the third speaker will be, if available, Natasha Malcolm, Global Marketing Manager, Digital Supply Chain Solution. These 2 speakers, or 3 speakers, will speak for 15 minutes. Please do us a favor and speak in 15 minutes so that we have more time for people to contribute. And then thereafter, we will have 4 discussants in the panel. And in the list, I have Mr. Roman Marumalo, Mr. Timothy Mbaga, Mr. Mama Lefesane Fakoe, and Mr. Kalishas Tutalife. For the interest of time, I would request each of the speakers to take the first 1 minute to introduce himself or herself so that people get to know him or her. Without further ado, you can see, colleagues, that we have a terrific lineup here, and Honorable Makame will go first. So please take the floor and proceed. Karibu. Just 1 minute to introduce yourself.
Use a colleague who is here for the benefit, because he's the only one, Honorable Mohamed Habib Mnya, who is also a member of the East African Legislative Assembly. Karibu sana mzee. Karibuni sana, and I hope we are going to have an interactive session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Mama Lefetsane Phakwe. I come from Lesotho, a small-scale farmer, a national chairperson, and a general secretary for Eastern and Southern Africa Small-Scale Farmers Forum, and a member of Rural Women's Assembly.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Johan Ekstein. I'm from South Africa. I work for a global company called SGS, and we're into farmer development and supporting farmers in the value chain of safe food and security in terms of food safety. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Roman Maromero from Malawi. I coordinate the donors supporting agriculture sector, as well as the donor group supporting the private sector development in Malawi. But from that, I'll bring in, I think, in this discussion, the perspective of donors' harmonized investment, coordination, but also aligning their investment to the priorities of the country, of the region, and how they contribute to the industrialization. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Carol Isaac Nyangaro from NMB Bank. I'm heading food and agri-business research and advisory services. Glad to be here, and we will share and exchange ideas from a commercial bank perspective and how that can also contribute towards the theme of the subject today.
Hello. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, panelists. It's good to be here and have this opportunity to discuss this very important topic because, you know, it talks about agriculture, and in agriculture it talks about food, it talks about agro-processing, which is really key to our survival. We cannot survive, we cannot industrialize without making sure that first we have food to eat and we have the raw materials to put in the industries. And the presentation is from subsistence farming to smart farming, SADC's potential for disruptive change. But before we go into the details and other things, first of all, it's very important to remind ourselves what is subsistence farming. Because we just have to, just a quick reminder, but it says when it's at a family level, a family does a farming, small scale, normally 1 acre, but not exceeding 2 acres, to feed themselves. And usually they don't generate surplus, or whatever surplus that is generated is kept for use, for consumption during the year until the next harvest period. And the other thing which is a characteristic of subsistence farming is that it does not generate profit. People do the farming for subsistence. They do not trade. So it's mainly for subsistence and survival. And it is done at the rural areas because usually rent is very low or free because people have their own land. And it's actually very primitive method of, I wouldn't say very primitive, but it's not modern in a way such that you don't get to higher integrate. You don't move to the next level of the value chain. You do not trade. So it locks you at the rural area without any potential of further advancement. And why does it fail? There are 3 reasons. Because it is susceptible to climate change. If there is drought, there is floods, there is anything to deal with climate, then subsistence farming will not yield positive results. Actually, you hear people going into hunger. And also, when you are anticipating that the rain will be coming, and then the way rain is misbehaving now, so it's a deviation from the actual. Your focus are deviating from the actual. So it makes that you don't have the food on the table. And we say it's also a deterrent for development in the rural area. And what is smart farming now? Smart farming, as opposed to subsistence farming, according to FAO, Food Agriculture Organization, it is farming management. That one isn't. Sorry, I mean, they're different. Anyway, smart farming is a method of farming that you use modern technology to generate more quality and more quantity. And farmers in the 21st century, they have access to GPS, they have, they can do soil scanning, they have data management, they have access to internet and ICT, and by using those, they can use pesticides and fertilizers more selectively to ensure that they get better yields and better results, and also they can use better seed varieties to get better yield on their farm. And also in this smart farming is when we also see the use of modern production technologies, the greenhouse and others. And the techniques can better monitor individual animals if you want to do some livestock keeping, so you can adjust their nutrition corresponding, and thereby you prevent disease and you enhance the health of the livestock. Or if it is poultry, the lives of the poultry. Or if it's aquaculture, likewise. So it applies and cuts on the board. But these are the painful facts I'd like to share. But these are facts to share with this audience about agriculture in Africa. One, it was also spoken here yesterday, on Monday, during opening, that 60% of the arable agricultural land is in Africa, is south of the Sahara. 60% of the arable land in the world. But we haven't made any or the best use of it. So that is one. Two, despite the importance of the agricultural sector, almost a quarter of the African population experiences hunger. A quarter of the sub-Saharan Africa population. And out of the 795 people suffering from malnutrition or undernourishment in the world, 220 live in sub-Saharan Africa. And 23.2%, it is estimated that 23.2% of the people in Africa, of the world, 23.2 are in Africa that suffer malnourishment. That is the 220 people. And also we have post-harvest losses in areas of abundance, usually maybe because due to lack of infrastructural access or preservation technologies and other things. And despite, again, having that 60% of the arable land and agricultural potential, Africa remains a net food importer. It is very sad that we have all the land and we're importing food. While if you look at some countries in Middle East, and specifically maybe if you look at the state of Israel, they export some food because they use modern technology in agriculture. And with us, we don't have to use even, some other formulated climate. We have natural climate, we have natural land, and we are not making the best use of it. For the sake of use of this Kiswahili saying, they say, penye miti hapana wajenzi. That is the situation in Africa now. And the role of smart agriculture and digital agriculture, how can it improve yield? One, we can have improved extension services, and I decided here that we look at 2 examples for extension services. There's an area in northern Tanzania and around the lake zone, which goes into Uganda. They do cassava plantations. And recently, even the bananas, there were some diseases which were affecting those crops. So we don't have so many extension officers on the ground because of lack of financing, or maybe inadequate financing, I would say. And most of them are located at the centers, but the farms are remotely located. And they wanted to trace the effects of the cassava mosaic disease and cassava brain streak disease. And they used mobile phone, and not really smartphone, but those basic phones just to send a message when you see signs of a disease to the center, and then they would dispatch the extension officers to come and follow up. So just that basic technology, not with the internet, it helped to save the day. And we see that technology indeed helps to save. And with the use of internet, then people can also be sharing some other additional information using smartphones. But with this, even the basic one can help. And the issue of market access, again, because we have seen the way people now are interacting more to at least share the information on crops and yield and harvest availability or animals availability. And it makes it easier for them to access the markets and trade. And also financing. And in the previous session, they were talking about science, technology, and innovation here. And people were saying, and really, that we are not lauding enough what we have done in area of science, technology, and innovation, especially our innovations. People are saying, patents have not been made and other things. But with the issue of mobile money, that is an African solution. You know, when you have a problem, that's where you find a solution. You don't find solutions where the problems are not there. So it's an African solution for providing mobile financing and mobile financing to transfer money from one area to another. People are enjoying that facility, and many mobile companies are facilitating money transfers in Tanzania, in East Africa, in SADC, and in other areas outside East Africa and SADC. So basically, we are saying we are moving forward, but also in terms of financing, we've seen crop insurance coming and other innovative products coming outside the mobile financing. And I'm quite sure we have a colleague from the National Bank of Commerce here who's a panelist, and he will chip in and give us more issues regarding that issues of the area of mobile financing. But better use of information relating to soils, pesticides, and fertilizers, because actually you get precise information, and you can use GPS, you can access internet, and you can access experts who will give you more information and guide you accordingly. And individuals and institutions can share experience and information for better improving quality and quantity of yields, and also better methods to organize into cooperatives and associations. You know, if we as countries in SADC, we are now 16, we decided that we cannot face the global market individually, but we have to synergize and come collective. As nations, what about individuals and institutions at the grassroots levels? So it's the importance of synergy, it's the importance of moving together, it's the importance of cohesion, it's the importance of solidarity. So the other area we were told to identify is to look at the key priority areas in value chains and agro-processing. And actually, that was a bit of a challenge, because determining a key priority value chain for a single country would involve the research, extensive consultations to determine, and to determine that for 16 countries, it is even more complicated. I remember here in Tanzania, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food Security and Cooperatives came with 5 crops that they said we should put them as a priority in the value chain. And as you may know, that Tanzania is the United Republic of Tanzania, and out of those 5, there's none for Zanzibar. And Zanzibar really dies to see cloves being mentioned, but it was missing, and they say, hey, what's happening here? So if that is just here in Tanzania, now how would it be for SADC, for 16 countries? And you say we want to identify key priority areas. Actually, I think that should be an issue that is member state to determine, and they should use their policies, but they should really see to it that the value chains are supported from the lowest level to the highest level. Because actually, from the discussions we had here and we've seen, is that if we don't develop these value chains accordingly and appropriately, and we export semi-processed or unprocessed agricultural produce outside Africa, then what we are doing is we are exporting jobs. And many people have been discussing that we are having booming youth, and the employment is really not growing to the same level. So, and at this juncture, I'd like to mention about the action plan for SADC industrialization strategy and roadmap, which was adopted by the summit in 2017 in Lesotho. And that encourages value chain development in agro-processing so as to make agriculture a precursor for industrialization. Our industries need raw materials that would be largely provided by agriculture. So it is very important. It is very important that we link the two. We link the two so that we achieve our goals and the way we want to move forward. And obstacles to smart farming and development in the regional agricultural value chains. Here is where we should really focus on. And one is the fact that in Africa, at the AU level, we have the Maputo Declaration adopted by the summit, which calls for member states to invest or to have 10% of the annual budget spent in the agricultural sector. And as a baby of the Maputo Declaration, we have the CADEP. The CADEP is a Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program that aims to see implementation of the Maputo Declaration and further to have the sectoral growth of 6% per annum. Now, 16 years on, after Maputo, where are we? Is Africa walking the talk, or are we just preparing policy statements and policy documents, and then we're saying, we're having the Maputo Declaration. Anywhere you go, if you have a discussion on agriculture, food security, you'll hear issues of Maputo Declaration and SADC. We have the EAC Food Security Action Plan in East Africa, much as this is SADC, but now where is it? I'm a member of the East African Legislative Assembly, and I'm very sorry to report here that even in EAC, we don't hear the issue of the Food Security Action Plan that was adopted by the summit even being mentioned on the way of how we are progressing on implementing the Food Security Action Plan. The issue of technical barriers to trade and non-tariff barriers is also an issue that is really bothering people. Every time you hear in SADC, you hear in the configuration which we have developed, EAC, SADC, and COMESA. We call it the EAC, SADC, COMESA tripartite or the Cape to Cairo initiative. NTBs are there. So we need to really work to resolve these NTBs and TBTs. And the issue of land tenure, culture and mindset. You'll find in some societies, women are not permitted to own land, but they are the sector of the population that really work on the farms. That is the fact. And in some communities, you find the men leaving the women to sow the farms, but when it comes to harvesting, they go to harvest, and then all the money is spent at the local clubs consuming local brew. So that is something which we really need to do and to work on, and to overcome, to empower our people to own, and especially women, and more importantly, to ensure that they reap the benefit of the land. And the other thing is access to internet and access to electricity. Not all the population in the in the rural area can access internet. So it will be difficult for them to exercise smart farming, and the electricity is a problem. It has been spoken in this forum we are having here many times, but we also saw during the opening that there are some initiatives which are being taken, and for example, here in the United Republic of Tanzania, there was a project for electrifying Tanzania, and that would really have a spillover to other member countries in the SADC. The project of Rufiji Basin hydropower, they call it Stigler's Gorge. It's going to generate more than 2,000 megawatts of electricity. So that project, after resistance from inside and outside pulling and pushing, is now in the implementation stage, and we're hoping in the next couple of months that will be in the offing, and will really relieve. Because you know, our competitors are not our fellow member SADC members, and not EAC members, but members from outside Africa. And the moderator is cautioning me to wind up, but also the issue of infrastructure. And we see that we need to access, rural areas which are producing are not being accessible by infrastructure, and that's where post-harvest losses occur. And how to overcome obstacles? We should have the business unusual approach, not the business as usual. We have to agree that change begins with us. We have to come to a resolution that we have done enough studies since independence, but we have not taken enough action. So it's time for action is now. We should commend initiatives like the one in Tanzania now, which was reported here, that business environment strengthening, making business environment friendly to overcome over-regulation and other things. And also issues like heavy investments which are being implemented by Kenya and Tanzania. I would give an example: the standard gauge railways and intermodal transportation system, whereby when we go to Lake Victoria, we go to Lake Tanganyika, we use also the ports. From rail to port to rail, or rail to port to road, we should consider using intermodal transportation system, and also improving the operations of trucks, because we saw issues of inconsistency in transportation using trucks. Mr. Moderator, I'm very sorry for having exceeded the minute. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makame, for breaking the ice. We now have pegs on which we can hang our different points. Dr. Makame has helped us to understand who subsistence farmers are, and that we have many of them. And what we want to transform these subsistence farmers into smart farmers. And we have seen the characteristics of smart farmers. those who are depending on ICT, maybe irrigation, they are smart than subsistence farmers. That's what we want to see, small-scale farmers going that way in our region. The question is, how do we do that? And through his presentation, he has highlighted some of the issues. I have heard him saying about improved extension services, and he has mentioned how that can be done, and improved market access, financing, prioritization of value chains, and so on. And now I'd like to call upon Mr. Johan Exten to take the podium and share with us what he has for us in store. Please, you are welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to be here. I must say before I start, I grew up on a farm, and I'm really talking with the heart of a farmer to you guys. I look much better in my farming clothes than in my black suit. And for that reason, for me, it's a passion to talk about farming. And one of my experiences was to work for 3 years in Uganda in the cotton industry, where we financed about 27,000 farmers. And it was a great experience, and we learned so much out of that experience. So today I want to talk to you about my company, SGS, and what we do in terms of value chain and in terms of uplifting small farmers and helping towards food security. At SGS, for us, it's very important to get economies of scale for farmers, because if you don't have economies of scale, the farmer would never ever be on a commercial level in terms of the international or global arena. And it's very important for farmers to get there. And then the first question I always hear is, how does a small farmer get to that level? Because it is virtually impossible if you have 1 acre or half an acre that you work. There is answers to those questions, and I'm going to try to address them. So in terms of, to understand what the market arena in Africa is all about, we have to realize that a lot of the production is dispersed amongst a lot of small farmers, which in itself is a big problem, because economies of scale is very difficult. Those small farmers have a problem to commercialize their farm because they don't have collaborative input management. In other words, they can't stand up in terms of volume when they buy stuff and also when they sell stuff. And that doesn't make them a very important role player in the bigger picture. Farmers also have no ability to fight or to talk about commodity prices if they are such a small role player. And in terms of that, crop governing bodies has become a very important thing in Africa, especially because the crop governing bodies is like the old cooperatives where they collaborate, they put resources together, and those farmers work as a group. So immediately the collaboration gives them more power. We see a lot of such examples in cocoa, in coffee, in cotton, and various other products that I can name. But it's all the high value products, but for so many other products there is no crop governing bodies. And one of the things that needs to take place is we need to create longer value chains within the SADC production cycle. The only way that we can do that is when we have transparency of what we produce. So I was very shocked this morning when I heard a gentleman say that we don't necessarily have to have the European standards. We don't have to comply to what the Europeans want. And that is a mistake, because then we will only be subsistence farmers consuming everything that we can produce. We want to be a role player in the international markets, and we can be that. There's no reason why we can't. As the speaker before me said, we are such a rich in agricultural sector in sub-Saharan Africa. We are the food basket of the future, and we need to get there. The way we're going to do that is we've got to overcome these challenges. So one of the big challenges is our production uncertainty. because we've got a fragmented market. So a lot of people come to our farmers and they want to sell inputs to them. So they've got all of these precision farming tools, but people are self-centered because they sell a product and they will promote their product. It is not a holistic vision that the farmer get on how to fix his agriculture and how to have the best quality and quantity. We also see that the buying power of small farmers is very limited, and there is no direct access to markets. Now, farmers cannot negotiate prices when they are limited to understand the market, but there are tools in the marketplace that can uplift these farmers and put them in the international market arena. We see various products sponsored by companies like Vodacom and MTN, where farmers are grouped. We see blockchain coming forward in Uganda, for instance, where you've got a cell phone currency that you work with because farmers doesn't have access to cash. So all of these tools are fragmented and available all over the market arena, but it's not necessarily in one package. So what we do is we want to actually go forward and to benchmark what we do in terms of our value chain. So our company doesn't supply any inputs or doesn't sell anything except we do testing, verification, and certification. In other words, in terms of our precision farming services, you can see a chain up there, starting with soil classification. It goes to soil analysis, it's water management, soil fertility, irrigation, planting, crop maintenance. So all of that, those services is scientific services where we do the test and we do recommendations to the farmers. We also geomap all the soil types and we will recommend the best use of land for that specific farmer. And we also supply a mobile app where the farmer has a map of his whole farm and we can actually drop a pin on his premises to say to him, on that point from the satellite images, you've got a problem in your crop. We also do site visits and we support the farmers in terms of going to them and meeting up with them. Once again, there's the full supply chain that we do only on precision farming. The next thing that I want to touch on is now that we've maybe fixed the farming, we need to say to each other what is happening in the marketplace internationally. So the way people shop has changed so dramatically, and the regulatory pressures on what the quality of food should be has changed. So businesses are held accountable for the full supply chain. What does it mean to us? It means that people won't touch products that they can't trust and they can't trace. It's very important. So if you want your beans to be in a can on the shelves of a European supermarket, they need to know whether it was produced safely. And for that reason, we are talking about the knowledge of the complete supply chain. We're also talking about compliance to basic standards and the flexibility to capture this data and to structure efficiencies and analyzing that data. So that is all available, and I'm not standing here and giving you a big dream of some wishy-washy thing that I thought of before I went to bed. We actually do this, and it's available to the farmer. So the question would rather be, why doesn't the farmers already implement and use this? Yes, there are a lot of farmers that use this. Sorry, my slide just... There we go. So in Europe, for instance, they would use a phone and they would scan the can of beans that I spoke about, and it will tell you all the tests that happened, all the producers in the process, and everything that happened on that farm. And then obviously what is happening in terms of the quality standards throughout the supply chain. So people want to know what they eat and where it comes from. The system that SGS has is called Transparency One. So all the different role players in the supply chain all the steps that they do can be uploaded onto this. So when you scan your product, you can have all this information right at hand as a consumer. And this is where the world is moving towards. Us in Africa, we need to realize that if we're going to become the food basket of Africa, of the global world out there, we need to see the supply chain as a long interlinked chain. We can't be only farmers. We can't only be commodity traders. We have to be part of the whole scheme. So in terms of what SGS does is we do the inspection, the testing, audits, training, and also advisory services in the whole supply chain. Then we upload it to our one system. So what we are suggesting is, from a SGS side, we want to get more involved in terms of our precision farming services to help to verify and certify the food value. So once you have that food value chain certified, you've got a great basis to start up this whole food security chain going forward into the markets. Then, as SGS, we would also suggest to SADC to map a lot of these value chains. So, in other words, if we can say a lot of fish is produced in this country and it goes to that country and this is where the value add takes place, then we can stimulate the expansion of processing facilities within the SADC region. As far as longer supply chains are concerned, it's really what we should be looking at within SADC. We don't want our raw products to go outside of our SADC and be processed and value added there, because that is where we lose a lot of our GDP, and that is where we lose a lot of job creation and prosperity for our own people. So our ultimate goal should be to process our farm goods within the SADC regions. Our Transparency One system, and sorry, I just went too fast here. The Transparency One is literally, if we deliver those services, we can come up from the bottom, from a farmer's level, and we can literally say to those users of that product in Europe or wherever, Asia, wherever you export to, this is where your product came from, this is who handled it, and this is the quality that you can expect in that can. And there's nothing extra in terms of what the farmer should do. Those systems are available. So for me, because anything that sounds too big scares farmers off, and it sounds like it is something that is very impossible to achieve. So I had to break it down and say, okay, in terms of precision farming, what's the target market and who will pay for this? And my conclusion is, if Southern Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa is really the food basket of the future, then we should get these global value chains involved in helping our farmers and also helping in terms of getting that value chain transparency up and running within Africa as well, because that is the way we can globalize our production in agriculture. How would we approach this? We want to group the different product movements within the SADC region and exports, so we can see what value lies where and how does it move around. So part of our Transparency One product is it will actually map a product as simple as that can of beans and tell you this is where the salt came from, that is where the water, and this is where the fish came from that was in that can, and this is how long ago it was caught out at sea. Once we have that, we can also determine what the product movement within the SADC region is. And if you can do that, we can source and we can collaborate in terms of value add. In other words, we promote value processing within the region. In terms of training, certifying, and verifying quality, it's all the services that are available in the market, but it means nothing to the small farmer if he doesn't have the end market. So he would rather consume his product than to sell it to some middleman who takes it to some auction floor who eventually makes more than the farmer himself. So it's important that the farmers are helped to start verifying and certifying the quality that they produce, because that quality then becomes an international role-playing commodity. And that is the way we can uplift our farmers in terms of what they do as small farmers. So if you look at the whole SADC region quickly, there's so many things that are exported, but it's really grouped into very big product groups. And this is one of the things that my project is all about, is to actually say, okay, if Namibia produces a lot of fish, does it go to Botswana, or does it go to Angola, or where does that fish go? And who processes that fish, and how much value do we add in terms of that to earn international currencies? We can do that. We can keep ourselves busy for a few days on that, because the export values are available on all the trade networks. But it's quite an extensive exercise. But once you've done that, you know exactly where the opportunity lies in terms of value adding. So our proposal to SADC is to take it in a step-by-step process where we identify initial first few countries and the initial list of commodities. And those commodities and countries will map in terms of what happens within SADC. This is just a suggestion, but we're open for changing around the commodities and the countries, because at the end of the day, it is where the most value lies, where you want to approach first. If we look at in terms of commodities, and this is what is so extremely mind-boggling to the farmer, this is just in terms of commodities, in terms of testing and inspection services that happens to a certain commodity. Let's take wheat or maize or whatever. All of those things happen to that product. And for that reason, the farmer is excluded from that value chain, which is not necessarily needed to happen. So once again, there's also audit and certification and market intelligence happening on commodities. If you look at food specifically, there's testing of the food, there's inspection of that food, and all of those things that you see there is really things that happen in the background where the farmer is not actually part of the process. Also auditing, technical solutions, and so on. So what we are saying is all of this information is really uploaded onto our Transparency One platform, and when the user opens it up and he knows anything about food auditing or certification, let's say he wants to go to see if this producer is a global GAP producer. He can go in there, he can look at the certificate, and he knows that this is produced under global GAP. In other words, under good agricultural practices, where the workers are looked after, where everything is in place in terms of good agricultural practices. So our motto is when you need to be sure. So people need to be sure what they eat. They need to also be sure that what they produce has value in the market. And this is exactly what we are trying to do in our precision farming and our agri-food and lifestyle businesses. And my role as a business development manager for Africa is to actually see that we can bring more money at farm level and make the farmers not consumers but producers of commodities. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Johan, for that nice presentation. Dear colleagues, I think you can see a clear line of linkage between the presentation by Dr. Makame and also the presentation by Johan. Because Dr. Makame introduced the issue of smart farmers. And Johan has shown us a practical way of creating smart farmers. How do we assist the smart farmers so that they become smart? Agricultural value chain is very long with so many nodes. The message from John is that they have decided to intervene by developing value chains. They develop value chains And specifically, they are in the area of certification and compliance. They make sure that they prepare farmers to comply with the requirements of lucrative markets in Europe. They give them certificates. Here, maybe he's referring to the issue of traceability. That is a requirement before you export in the EU market, the issues of quality, and so on. So that is, Joanne, thank you very much for highlighting on these issues. Now, can we put our hands together for our two presenters, please? Thank you so much. Now, we have Mr. Caro from the National Bank of, no, NMB Bank, because he said he wants to leave. I just want to give him an opportunity to speak first, and then you can leave thereafter. You are welcome, please, to contribute.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I have to apologize because there were prior commitments. So I'll be very brief and echo to what my colleagues have already said, and perhaps add a few things and maybe a couple of thoughts around it. To start with, I want every one of us to think about this very carefully. We are talking about a region that has over 340 million people, meaning SADC region. And at the same time, we have about 39 to 40% of the population that is living in urban places. So it is not a small thing. And from a commercial perspective, this says a lot in terms of the seriousness that needs to be put in place so that we really, really walk the talk, as Honorable Dr. Makame said. So it is not a small matter. It's also about livelihood, because we are talking about 60% of the population that is living in the rural areas, and we should be concerned that there's no, very strong development in terms of supporting that transformation. At least in the last one decade, there are a couple of spots where you could see there are areas where there's really development. Now let's get the basics right. This is an investment decision which either a country or an entrepreneur or any stakeholder that is involved within that sector has to make. And it's about getting also those basics right. It's not a political agenda, because most people live in the rural areas. No. It is not a help as it sounds, because it is, moving the smallholder to a smart farmer. It sounds like you're helping somebody. This is an investment decision which a smallholder farmer has to make, supported by the respective governments, and making sure that all ingredients are in place, or at least substantial amount of support is available to see this transition taking place. And therefore, I think, in my opinion, markets will be #1 priority. It has already been mentioned by one speaker here that we have a bigger region that we're looking at. The inter-regional, between countries trade should be a critical aspect, or something that needs to be deliberated within in the course of these meetings. Are we really taking off the red tapes? Are we helping or facilitate the movement of goods from one country to another, so that the very smallholder, that is by majority, over 60% that live in the SADC region, depends on it. You need the bank to be sure that if they lend money, if there's capital given out, they are able to track between the commodity that is being produced and the cash that went out, so that there's a net effect of repayment at the end of the day, and the smallholder makes money and reinverts back on the technology and other things. If that is not happening, it's something to think about. The second block that I think is most important is actually the financing, which I've already mentioned. So that financing will catalyze the whole process. What SGS is doing, that will require a bit of financing. Donors will never be there forever. What everybody else is thinking in the room about the smallholder, helping, supporting, encouraging, empowering, that requires a bit of financing. It could be own equity, or it could be a loan from a bank, or it could be any support that is available in the market. So it's very important that these things are packed together and lead to a total solution around getting this farmer that we're talking about to a smart farm. And the third most important thing is technology. So we've seen a lot of inventions of recent. The payment solutions which originated from Kenya. Now, it's a world phenomenon. We've seen the digitization of the warehouses, mostly in the southern part of Africa, where it's high tech, and a player within the chain can be able to track and know how many kilos are in X warehouse. Can I get financing for that very amount of kilos, and so forth and so forth. These three things are very important. If we really have to address the issues around the 60% of the population that lives in the SADC region. And I think, in my opinion, the governments have a bigger role to play in terms of setting the policies right and much more predictable. And we have evidence where in some of the value chains in this country, in Tanzania for instance, they have developed organically without a donor support. And it is very possible. It is locally generated because all instruments are in place. And it is possible to allow investors, including the smallholder, to save some amount of money because markets are improved, so they make better margins. Because the storage facilities are better, so they are not afraid that their maize or beans or rice or anything else they store, be it in a cold room, will be destroyed in the next 6 months. So they can really work around better prices along the season. Because of technology, they can know on time what the price is prevailing in the market, what seed they need to use, where is the cheapest source of that seed, what price do they need to pay for. And in this case, the regulation becomes most important because otherwise, you get other people running over other people. Before you know it, the whole thing is distorted. So it has to be predictable in terms of markets. If I invest in a small farm of 5 acres, I need to be sure that the market I go to will never be disrupted by bad policies. It's a matter of practicalities. So based on that, I believe and I think, and looking at it from a commercial angle, if the three things are put in place, then the rest will definitely grow organically. There will be an appetite for SGS to really invest more in technology and invent more solutions because there is predictability. There will be interest from the financial institutions to come up with more solutions that reach out to those unbankable populations. Health, agriculture, the crop insurance, all these things always follow a stable ecosystem. And probably that will be my last comment, and thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Carol, for that brief presentation. That has added value to the ongoing discussion. What I've got from you is that inter-regional trade is the best way forward if we want to assist these farmers. We must open up the borders so that farmers can sell their crops wherever they want. And actually, if we remove these red tapes in inter-regional trade, we can unlock so many issues, so many challenges facing the farmers, including financing. Because banks would like to put money where they are assured that the cash flow will allow them to get the money back. So these are the issues that the governments of the SADC region must consider seriously. The policies must be consistent so that decisions can be predictable and so on. These are very good points. Thank you so much, Carol. Now you can leave if you want. Okay, can we put our hands together for him as he leaves? Thank you so much. Now, I just want to give an opportunity to our discussants to give us inputs into what they have heard so far. We have the first speaker, Mr. Roman Marumaro. Mr. Roman Marumaro, with the coordinator of Private Sector Development Donor Group, Malawi. Can you please take the floor? Please, proceed.
Thank you, the moderator. Just to make the name pronunciation accurate, I am Roman Marumero, but I'm not from Rome. I'm from within the region. Well, as I mentioned, I coordinate the donors to make sure that there is coordinated and harmonized support to agriculture, but at the same time, private sector development. I'm sure you would believe with me one of the saying which says, if you want to run far, you run alone. I mean, if you want to run fast, you run alone. But if you want to run far, you run in a coordinated manner. And that's a principle the development partners thought of. And this is in line with the CADE principles, the Paris Declaration principles, which is saying the development partners, those supporting different initiatives, they have to bring it on board in a coordinated manner so that there is complementarity, there is synergy. And Malawi is one of the countries, I think here in Africa, another one is Ethiopia, I know well, and Malawi, where the donors, they are together within the sector to make sure that there is coordinated investment. So they decided to establish a secretariat as a hub of information, but also to manage the database so that if the private sector want to tap from the donor resources, they could access through that secretariat, engaging the government between development partners, go through that office. Anyway, we can talk a lot as a model, but maybe as a message at regional level, I haven't heard of that happening. How do we bring the development partners to make sure that what they support at regional level is coordinated? If we are talking of integrated approach, all these value chains, why are we leaving the development partner support scattered? Probably it's $1 million question the SADC Secretariat will have to consider in the future. Let me quickly also mention the flagship of the development partners as a support to help the farmers move from subsistence to more commercial. The development partners support successful policy and regulatory development and implementation. They also support infrastructure development. There was a colleague here from African Development Bank yesterday who was proud to say African Development Bank have supported infrastructure development like the corridor itself, the roads. But another flagship is also the capital investment in the markets, the commodity exchanges. Another one is access to finance. Probably we would pay more attention to this. How do donors support access to finance? This is through risk-sharing facilities, where they engage with the commercial banks and then the farmers could access the credit, but also credit facility itself, the matching grants, but also capital investment into the development banks. Some countries are moving into establishing a development bank, and development partners are coming in to support feasibility studies, even injecting the capital itself into the bank itself. But all this is happening with a thinking to shift the paradigm of the farmers from where it is common now to say, let's get the money to do something, but rather to say, let's do something to get the money. And now the money becomes a catalyst. Those who are already motivated, those who are already inspired to move into agriculture as a business. Now, based on the presentations that have been made, I would like to make quick comments in terms of the obstacles that have been mentioned. Dr. Abdullahi mentioned about the CADAP, which was endorsed by the heads of states. It was being adopted. Now it is shifted into Malabo Declaration. But the key question comes in is, how much are we achieving from such commitments? Now, I will zero it down in terms of the country level. What are some of the obstacles which the development partners and the government needs to engage more? First and foremost is in terms of the policy framework. How the countries develop the policies and the regulations looking into the long-term perspective versus the short-term investments. It is not a matter of how many trillions of dollars is invested in the subsidy, but rather it's a matter of how strategic is that investment to drive growth, to accelerate the market development. And that's where the key concern is, and probably a big obstacle. But similarly also on the policies, the political will. If we have policies in place, they are endorsed and they are launched, how do we gain the political will? Yesterday we had a good panelist here of the ministers. It was pleasing to note that they said there is a political will. But probably a next question would be, how is that political will translated into resource allocation, into strategic areas? And how is that political will translated into the messages they deliver at a platform? Do they focus on the quick wins today, because it's an year of elections, versus a 5-year, a 10-year, 15-year, 25 years investment? That's where we need probably to strike the balance. And by the end of the day, to achieve value for money. Another obstacle, probably I'll just mention only 2 obstacles. There's a long list, but I would mention one which I've seen that it hasn't come out probably quite prominent in the discussion here. I expected probably one paper to focus on this obstacle which I'm going to mention. And I believe after mentioning it, I'll receive a loud of applause for those who are gender activists and women around the room. It's the issue of investment towards women and youth economic empowerment. Studies have shown that 70% of the farmers in the region, in the developed countries, are women. And they are in the supply chain. But what are the approaches doing? They have got limited access to land, limited access to extension services, limited access to skills. It's like we are having a very good team of players. And we are saying, okay, to build up a good team to win, let's the whole team be comprised of only defenders, assuming men we are defenders. And then we assume that we are going to win. No, it needs integration. And that's where the elements of how do we invest into the women empowerment, so that they access their skills, they access the services, and they access even the credit. This is one of the key drivers as an obstacle. So in summary, in conclusion, what I would say is all the policies, all the processes, the investment we make, they have to build in terms of how we address these key obstacles. The policies themselves, but at the same time, integrating the drivers of the economy, who are the women, the youth. Before this session, there was an interesting one which was talking about innovations. And it was good to see an acknowledgement to say the youth are becoming more innovative, even using their available limited tools to become more innovative. If we take opportunity to empower them more, are we not going to achieve more? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Who is this? Roman, for that interesting contribution. There are so many messages from your presentation, but the key message is that if you want to move fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go with the others. Now, it seems if you want to go with the others,